for those of you that have been following Parliament Television, we have been broadcasting this special session since morning, and this afternoon we continue with the live broadcast, and it's under the theme Beyond 2030, Rethinking Global Cooperation, Accountability and Youth Action in a Polarized World. And so this session has actually attracted youth delegates from across Zambia and the region. And just now we do cross over to the floor as the afternoon session begins.
Reading the resolution, and we've asked your eyes, we will go into voting.
Would the votes be manually counted, or is there...
Manually counted.
All right.
We shall now proceed to the presentation of draft solutions from our committee. At this stage, I'll invite each committee chair to approach the podium and introduce the main submitter of their committee's resolution. Following the introduction, the main submitter will present the resolution before the General Assembly. I kindly remind all delegates to maintain decorum and give their full attention to each presenter. We are now live on Parliament TV. The chair now recognizes the Committee of General Assembly 1. I invite the chair of General Assembly 1 to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Good afternoon, General Assembly. The Chair of the General Assembly First Committee has the honor of presenting the outcomes of the committee's deliberation on the following agenda item: rebel financing and protracted conflicts in the Sahel, Sudan and South Sudan, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and Central African Republic, tracing illicit financial flows, external sponsorship, and accountability gaps sustaining Africa's deadliest wars. The Chair now takes great pleasure in yielding the floor to the main submitter, the distinguished delegate of Zambia, who will present the resolution on the behalf of the committee. Distinguished delegate, the floor is yours.
The General Assembly now recognizes delegate of Zambia representing the General Assembly 1 Committee as the main submitter of the resolution.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the sponsor is the Republic of Zambia to the draft resolution of GA1, and its signatories are Russia, Rwanda, Somalia, Palestine, South Africa, Libya, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Sweden. The preamble of the draft resolution kicks off. We are reaffirming its commitment to the United Nations Charter and Sustainable Development Goals, SDG 16, which calls for peaceful and inclusive societies, access to justice, and accountable institutions at all levels. We are deeply concerned by the ongoing human suffering caused by protracted armed conflict in the Sahel, Sudan, South Sudan, Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Central African Republic, which have displaced millions of civilians and continue to destabilize the broader African continent. We also acknowledge that illicit financial flows, including revenue from illegal minings, arms trafficking, and external state and non-state sponsorship, continue to sustain armed groups operating in these regions, prolonging conflict and undermining peace efforts. We recognize that the existing of the United Nations panel of experts, the Financial Action Task Force, and the Egmont Group of Financial Intelligence Units, and the African Union Peace and Security Council in monitoring and reporting on the rebel financing illicit financial network across Africa. We recall the relevant United Nations Security Council resolutions, including Resolution 2536 of 2020 on the South Sudan, Resolution 2612 of 2021 on the DRC, and Resolution 2649 of 2022 on the Central African Republic, as well as the African Union's Silencing the Guns initiatives, which together affirm the international community's commitment to end armed conflict in Africa. We note with concern that existing sanctions, regimes, and arms embargoes have limited effects due to weak enforcement, corruption, porous borders, and insufficient corruption between member states and in sharing financial intelligence. We appreciate the ongoing peace and mediation efforts by the Southern African Development Community, SADC, and the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, and the Economic Community of the Central African States in supporting ceasefire, transitional governance, and disarmament processes in conflict-affected areas. We also bear in mind that in sovereignty of all member states, while recognizing the shared responsibility of the international community to support affected nations in building resilient institutions capable of preventing rebel financing and sustaining peace. Our operative clause in these draft resolutions, first is, we call upon all member states, particularly those bordering on conflict-affected regions, to review and strengthen their existing anti-money laundering and counter-terrorism financing legislation with the FATF standards, and to ensure that their financial intelligence units are adequately resourced and operationally independent. We also urge member states to cooperate fully with the existing United Nations panels of experts monitoring arms embargoes and sanctions in Sudan, South Sudan, DRC, and Central African Republic by providing timely and verifiable financial and intelligence information and implementing by the panels of recommendation through their national legal systems. We also encourage member states to make greater use of existing financial intelligence sharing platforms, including the Egmont groups of the United Nations Counter-Terrorism Committee executive directorates, to exchange information on individual and network that are involved in financing armed groups and pursue bilateral mutual legal assistance agreement where cooperation gaps exist. We request the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime to expand its existing technical assistance program to help conflict-affected and neighboring states build to capacity of their custom agencies, prosecutors, and financial investigators to detect, trace, and prosecute illicit financial flows linked to rebel financing. We recommend the United Nations Office of Counter-Terrorism actively deploy its global border and security management program to provide specialized training, counter-smuggling protocol, and logistical capacity building to broader control officer within the Sahel, Sudan, South Sudan, and DRC, and Central African Republic. We also recommend that member states engage within Cambridge process certification scheme to advocate for the expansion of its scope and strengthen of its verification mechanism, recognizing that the current scheme does not adequately cover gold, cotton, and other minerals exploited to finance armed conflict. We support the scaling of existing disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration (DDR) programs in conflict-affected states, and encourage donor member states and international financial system to increase funding for community-level economic recovery initiatives that reduce the vulnerability of risky populations to recruitment by armed groups. We request the Secretary General to submit a report to the General Assembly within 24 months of the adoption of this resolution, assessing its effectiveness of the current mechanism in disrupting rebel financing and identifying accountability gaps that require further action by the member states. We also decide to say we remain seized of the matter and review progress based on the Secretary General's report with the view to recommend further measures as necessary. I submit to the Chair.
Thank you, Delegate, for your presentation. The floor is now open to point of informations. All delegates wishing to ask point of informations may raise their placard. Delegate of Sudan, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Sudan will have to hit the nail on the head. The thing that is causing migration in Africa is global harm distribution. what is the community doing about global harm distribution that has been distribution every day, and it is now becoming the world richest organization because of harm dealing of Africa. Another information, I don't know if the committee is aware that people are being bombed in Africa. That is the thing that is causing climate change. Thank you. I submit, Madam Chair.
Delegate of Zambia, you may respond.
Thank you. The delegate of Sudan. The delegate of Sudan, thank you for that question. The delegate of Zambia, not with concern that the existing sanctions that are happening in the affected member regional states are affecting the instability of the delegate of Zambia in these matters that are happening there. For that reason, Zambia is advocating for mechanisms that are already in existence, but putting enforcement and accountability to such situations, because the instability of the other member state is the instability of Zambia. Thank you.
The floor is open to any point of information. Delegates wishing to ask point of information may raise their placard. The delegate of Russia, you may ask your POI.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the wise call. To the delegate, the main submitter of the committee, the Federation of Russia would love to find out what is your stance in terms of safeguarding refugees that are found in these armed conflicts, and what was the resolution in terms of safeguarding the refugees?
Delegate, kindly rephrase the question. The delegate cannot ask another delegate for a personal stance.
Statement withdrawn, Madam Speaker. To the delegate, the main submitter of the committee, the question, the point of information states, what are the resolutions in terms of safeguarding the refugees that are displaced through these armed conflicts in the region? I submit.
Delegate of Zambia, you may respond.
Thank you. The delegate of Zambia, the resolutions that it's urging on board, it's to actually work on the resolutions which were made previously, which is Resolution 2536 2020 on South Sudan, and also Resolution 2612 of 2021 on the DRC, and Resolution 2649 of 2022 on Central African Republic. These resolutions have been in existence, but what the challenge is the way they are being enforced and accountability, the way it is done. It doesn't matter whether we come up with new frameworks or mechanism in how we can trace or rather curb or rather end these illicit financial flows in the existing regions. But what will matter the most is what measures, what management, what enforcement are we going to put in place trying to reduce the illicit financial flows in the affected regions. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. We will now proceed to final voting. I will hand over to the President of the General Assembly to commence final voting of the General One Assembly resolution.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. Dear delegates, as we are going to do the voting, we are going to indicate by raising our placards if we will be voting for or voting against. All those in favor of the drafted resolution of GA1, please raise your placards. Keep them raised as the chair is counting your votes. Kindly maintain the silence, delegates. Thank you, delegates. Placards down. All those against indicate by raising up your placards. Thank you very much, delegate. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows. 104 votes were in favor of the resolution, and 12 were against the resolution. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the resolution of GA1. You may now take your seat. The Chair now recognizes the Committee of General Assembly 2. The Council will invite the Chair of General Assembly 2 to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Thank you to the Secretary General for giving me this opportunity to speak to the House. Good afternoon, honorable members of the House. My name is Walingulan Domingu, the Chair of the General Assembly's Second Committee, ECOFIN. In our committee, the main topic is reforming the global financial system towards a new Bretton Woods architecture for development equity. As a chair, I would like to call upon our main submitter. May the delegate of the Republic of Zambia please rise and approach the podium.
The delegate of the Republic of Zambia has been recognized by the General Assembly as the main submitter of the resolution from General Assembly 2. You have the floor to present your committee's resolution.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Chair. The resolution of the General Assembly 2 reflects the voices of the people, ensuring that the global financial system represents the human lives as we achieve SDG 8, 10, and 11. As a committee, it is our mandate that we do not protect the balance sheets of isolated institutions, but to safeguard the economic and social rights of the global population. Today, the General Assembly's Second Committee brings to you a framework that fulfills that promise. The General Assembly's Second Committee is guided by Article 55 and 67 of the Charter of the United States, which pledge all member states to joint action and separate action to promote higher standards of living, full employment, and conditions of economic and social progress. Recalling the historic mandate of the United Nations General Assembly Resolution 3201 of 1st May 1974, containing the Declaration on the Establishment of New International Economic Order, which explicitly demanded that the international financial system operate on the principles of equity, sovereign equality, interdependency, and common interests, reaffirming the core objectives of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, specifically Sustainable Development Goal 1, no poverty, and Goal 10, reduce inequalities, which require robust, equitable global governance structures to safeguard domestic investments in human capital, recognizing that the immediate liquidity and interrupted development financing are indispensable lifelines for the eradication of poverty and the promotion of equitable, climate-resilient economic development across the countries, emphasizing that 1944 Bretton Woods architecture was designed during an era when the vast majority of the developing countries was under the colonial rule, making structural governance reform and fulfilled requirements, global decolonization, and sovereign equality. Deeply concerned that the current international financial architecture has entrenched structural inequalities between creditor nations and the developing sovereign debtors, often resulting in prolonged debt distress that severely constrains necessary domestic fiscal space. noting with satisfaction the technical advancement engineered by the International Capital Market Association and the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development regarding the creation of standardized, data-driven contractual templates for state contingent debt instruments. The General Assembly too urges member states and international financial institutions to prioritize the protection of national sovereignty, domestic social investment, and human dignity above rigid austerity measures during all future sovereign debt restructuring and negotiation process. Request the universal integration of legally binding climate resilient debt clauses.
Delegate, your time has elapsed. The floor will now open for all point of informations. Delegates wishing to ask point of informations may raise their placard. Delegate of Nigeria, you have been recognized, followed by Delegate of the United States.
So the delegation of Nigeria has a question to the resolution. Is the purpose stability, development, finance, debt relief, or de-dollarization? I submit to Chair.
Delegate, you may respond.
May the delegation repeat their question?
Delegate, kindly rephrase your question.
Is the purpose stability, development, finance, debt relief, or de-dollarization?
The
Delegate,
topic
you may respond.
is restructuring the global financial system for equitable development. At the moment, we're looking at the current developing countries, and we find that these countries are prone to economic shocks as well as volatility of commodity prices. The restructuring of debt is to ensure that the austeric measures caused by the structural adjustment programs do not repeat themselves. These promoted inequality such as poverty, dollar devaluation, as well as increased poverty. If we look at the World Bank assessment reports, as well as Financial Insight, we find that 70% of citizens living in developing countries were left in poverty. So the General Assembly too proposes that climate resilient debt clauses are enacted in every lending agreement to ensure that the dignity of the people that these policies are enacted for are protected. Thank you.
The Delegate of USA.
Does this resolution alter voting power within institutions like the IMF, or does it only adjust funding mechanisms without changing decision-making authority? Because majority of the voting rights in the IMF are determined by the financial contributions of countries. Therefore, countries like Africa, countries in continents like Africa are often underrepresented. How does this resolution aim to address that?
Thank you very much, Delegate of United States of America. So yes, this resolution has the double majority governance framework, which states that African countries will have their own voting system, part of the IMF, as well as the lending countries. So before a policy is actually enacted, it has to pass state majority of the developing countries, as well as state majority of the developed countries. And to ensure that these policies benefit both, there is an autonomous body that's going to make sure that the resolution and the policies that do pass benefit both parties. Thank you.
No further questions. We will now proceed to final voting. I will now hand over to the President of the General Assembly to conduct the final voting.
Thank you, Secretary General.
Delegate.
Thank you. Delegates will indicate by raising up our placards. All those in favor of the drafted resolution for GA2, please raise up your placards. Thank you, delegates. Placards down. All those against indicate by raising up your placards. Thank you very much, delegates. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows: 172 votes in favor and 7 votes against the resolution. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the Resolution of General Assembly 2.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Chair.
The Assembly now recognizes the Committee of Food and Agricultural Organization, FAO. The Chair now invites the Chair of FAO to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, honorable members of this House. I am Chair Melvin Hoggins from FAO, and before we proceed any further, I would like to thank the Secretary General for giving us this time to speak to the House. I will hand over to my co-chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members of this House. I am co-chair Tumelo Muyunda. The topic at hand today is food security and climate change in relation to SDG 2, Zero Hunger, and SDG 3, Good Health and Well-being. As co-chair, I would like to call upon the delegates of the United Kingdom and Somalia to rise and present their resolution.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate of the United Kingdom and Somalia as the main submitter of the resolution from Food and Agricultural Organization. The delegate has the floor to present your committee's resolutions.
Honorable Chair and distinguished delegates, the Food and Agriculture Organization is honored to present this resolution on food security and climate change. To the General Assembly, recognizing the significance of climate change and human security in being a key factor to global stability, noting with grave concern climate-induced displacement of 21.5 million people annually, creating forced migrations, keeping in mind the insufficiency of tailored procedures, strategies, and infrastructure supporting climate action, reaffirming its commitment to conventions such as the UNFCCC and SDG 13, Combat to Climate Change and its impacts, expecting the establishment and execution of policies and projects to assure that vulnerable populations are not hit first and hardest by climate shocks. We have the operating clauses as follows. calls upon member states, the World Bank, NGOs, and contributing countries to come forward and donate funds towards the cause of protecting civilization through new and upgraded systemic infrastructure to safeguard food corridors, implementation of training to personnel expected to operate latest technological initiatives, providing of new alert and warning systems to detect erratic weather patterns, and intense research programs between UN agencies, local universities to map high-resolution climate vulnerability data. The committee will now hand over to the delegate of Somalia to continue.
Thank you, Delegate of United Kingdom. I shall proceed. This delegation shall proceed. Okay, so the next recommendation is that the Food and Agriculture Organization and the United Nations Environment Programme establish a risk template to carry out operational risk assessments to identify areas of high food, water insecurity, and scarcity. The other recommendation is that this committee urges countries to implement strict and robust rules governing global industrial emissions and climate-induced displacement. Member states to create a regulatory oversight board to penalize entities that fail to comply with a given and agreed manual of rules and submit reports. The other recommendation is that we suggest as a committee that we reap positive outcomes that can further implement various regions across member states and stricken countries more effectively and efficiently. The other recommendation states that member states push countries to have a mandatory limit of any anti-climate action activities across industries to preserve the ecosystem. The other recommendation states that the establishment of a voluntary climate knowledge hub under the FAO framework to facilitate the sharing of best practices regarding safe and clean water management, drought-resistant agriculture, and coastal defense engineering. The other recommendation is that triple renewable capacity by scaling them up and incorporating battery power to reduce coal usage. The last recommendation is that this resolution will promote climate action, human and food security, and the victims who suffer the consequences of climate displacement and crisis, ensuring that they get the basic needs they deserve right away. This delegation hands over to you, Chair.
The floor is now open for all points of information. Delegates wishing to ask points of information may raise their placard. Delegate, please stand up and state your country.
Thank you. The delegation of Rwanda would like to know what steps will be taken to ensure corridors remain safe and open.
May the delegate repeat their question louder?
Delegate, kindly rephrase your question.
Okay. What steps will be taken to ensure food corridors remain safe and open?
To ensure food corridors remain safe, first of all, that's why the FAO have taken a keen interest in investing in climate-resilient infrastructure, such as rain beds. Not only that, but infrastructures that will protect food corridors, granaries, and storage facilities from intense weather conditions, such as tsunamis, monsoons, hurricanes, and whirlwinds.
Delegate of Nigeria, you have been recognized.
Ladies and gentlemen, as the Federal Republic of Nigeria, our POI is based on the Clause 7, which calls for increased agricultural investment in developing nations. Many African states, like the Federal Republic of Nigeria, many African states, like Nigeria, spend more on debt servicing than agriculture. So will the funding commit to debt relief or grants, not loans, so we don't solve hunger by creating debts?
Delegate, you may respond.
Thank you, Chair. So firstly, we implement using the technology studies. Now, Sweden and other countries, when they come together, they'll implement smart agriculture. Now, smart agriculture is one of the methods that we've used to implement this, how is it going to be done? Well, there'll be training that will take place, online and physical. So now, imagine a situation where member states in the country, member states in different parts of the world, are trained with smart agriculture. We'll use different technologies in order to implement that particular activity. So different countries or different member states will be trained, and once they are trained, they'll implement that down there. Now, we are focusing on climate change first, because if we focus on food and hunger, it's a vice versa activity. If we focus on food and hunger, we may not focus on climate change. So once we tackle climate change, indirectly, we are also giving access to food security, because climate change will produce and give us the upper activity, or give us the upper hand in order to tackle food security. Thank you.
We will now proceed to final voting. I will now hand over to the President of the General Assembly to conduct the final voting.
Thank you, Secretary General. All those in favor of the draft resolution of FAO, please raise your placards. Thank you, delegates. Placards down. All those against. Thank you, delegates. Placards done. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows: 106 votes in favor, 57 against. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the resolution of Food and Agricultural Organization. You may take your seats. The Chair now recognizes the Committee of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. The Chair now invites the chairs of the UNFCCC committee to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Good afternoon, honorable members. I am Chair Malunjika Wamazaza Mvula from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. Before we proceed any further, I would like to thank the Secretary General for giving us time to speak to the House. And now I will hand over to my co-chair.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, honorable members of this House. I am co-chair Bupechiana of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. In our committee, the main topic of focus was climate change, green economics, and policy paralysis politics, and accountability in global climate action, which is focused on SDG 13. I would now call the delegate of Rwanda to present the resolution. Thank you.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate of Rwanda as the main submitter of the resolution from the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. You have the floor to present your committee's resolution.
Thank you. The delegation of Rwanda is honored to be the main submitter of the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change Resolution, the General Assembly. Bearing in mind that climate change remains a global challenge affecting countries across all regions of the world through rising temperatures, extreme weather events, biodiversity loss, and threats to sustainable development, acknowledging that developing countries and vulnerable populations who are on the front lines of climate change need support, yet global efforts to combat climate change and achieve sustainable development are falling short. Recognizing that developing countries continue to experience some of the most severe impacts of climate change, despite contributing the least to historical global greenhouse gas emissions. Guided by the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, particularly Sustainable Development Goal 13, Climate Action, and emphasizing that effective climate action is essential to achieving long-term sustainable development, economic resilience, and social well-being for present and future generations. Number 1, recommends the implementation of equitable climate responsibility frameworks guided by the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities, considering historical emissions, development levels, and national capacity in order to ensure a fair and balanced distribution of obligations between developed and developing states. 2, urges the scaling up of predictable and accessible climate finance, including increased contributions to the Green Climate Fund and related mechanisms to support developing countries in climate adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development, while simplifying application and disbursement procedures for least developed countries. 3, requests the development of a cooperative emissions accountability framework aligned with nationally determined contributions designed to make climate action effective.
Your time has come to an end. Thank you.
The floor is now open for all points of information. Delegate of Germany, you have been recognized.
The delegation of Germany would like to know how this committee will reconcile the gap between the rate at which global frameworks are implemented and the rate at which environmental change occurs. Because the rates differ and environmental change often occurs faster than global framework can be implemented in the system. I submit.
Delegate, you may respond.
May the delegation of Rwanda refer this question to one of the committee members?
So the delegation of Turkey would answer the question of the delegation of Germany. The first clause of our resolution states that the recommendation of these frameworks into the system. We're not trying to implement these frameworks. The purpose of the framework is to guide cooperation and responsibility, sharing rather than impose binding enforcement, measure that provides a basis of fair climate action while respecting national sovereignty. So the main purpose is not to enforce or enact this, but to use this as a platform to encourage nations more. Yes.
Delegate, you may stand up and ask your question.
Thank you, Honorable Secretary General, for the opportunity to speak. I am the delegate of South Africa, and we as delegation are wondering how this committee tends to resolve the e-waste that is contributing to climate change, because currently the world is heading into a digital era. There's a lot of e-waste, and this e-waste is affecting our oceans because there are cables running through. And so how exactly does this committee intend to find solution towards that, because you are mostly looking at how climate change is impacting us and its probable solutions. Thank you, I submit.
Delegate, you may respond.
May the delegation of South Africa repeat their question?
Delegate of South Africa, kindly articulate your question.
To simply rephrase it is, we have a lot of e-waste that is happening through the digital transformation that is happening globally. So how exactly does this committee that is sitting and proposing resolutions tend to cater for those issues that are going on? How do you intend to combat e-waste? Because it's speaking to SDG 13, that is climate change.
Delegate, you may respond.
Yes, this framework is speaking about a lot of. This framework also speaks about renewable sources and renewable methods in which countries can use instead of other methods. The digital world is becoming a very, may the delegation of Rwanda refer this question to a committee member?
To answer the question for the delegation of South Africa, with the investment into green technology, we would be able to transition from the generation of e-waste, and we would transition into a more environmentally friendly as we progress through the system.
No further questions. We will now proceed to final voting. I will now hand over to the President of the General Assembly to conduct the final voting.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary General. All those in favor of the drafted resolution, please raise your placards. Thank you, delegates. Placards down. All those against. Silence, please, delegates. We are still in the formal session. Thank you, delegates. Placards done. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows: 44 votes in favor, 160 votes against. The resolution has failed to obtain the required majority and is therefore rejected. The Chair now recognizes the Committee of the Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. The Assembly will now invite the Chair of ECOSOC to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the Committee's resolution.
Honorable President of the General Assembly, distinguished delegates. The Dais welcomes all delegations to the ECOSOC session of the General Assembly. The agenda under consideration is energy poverty in resource-rich regions under SDG 7. The Chair now recognizes the main submitter of the ECOSOC resolution on energy poverty in resource-rich regions, and invites the delegate of Ghana to formally present it before the Assembly.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate of Ghana as the main submitter of the resolution from ECOSOC. You have the floor to present your committee's resolution. You may begin.
All protocols observed, the General Assembly, affirming the Sustainable Development Goal 7, affordable and clean energy, and Sustainable Development Goal 8, decent work for all and sustainable economic growth. Recalling the Paris Agreement of 2015, developed countries are encouraged to provide financial support to developing countries for mitigation and adaptation efforts. Acknowledging that the energy crisis plaguing many countries in the global south directly inhibits the fulfillment of Sustainable Development Goal 8, leaving economies stagnant and fluctuating between decline and brief unsustainable growth. Deeply concerned that over 600 million people in the sub-Saharan Africa still lack access to clean, reliable, and affordable electricity. This significantly slows down economic productivity and growth. Noting with thanks the support and contribution made by the World Bank in providing finance for improved electricity services. This resolution contains 11 operative clauses aimed at addressing energy poverty in resource-rich regions. Number 1, calls upon developed nations to invest in modern and resilient infrastructure that facilitates reliable and consistent transmission of energy. Number 2, calls upon resource-rich states to allocate 15% of mining and natural resource revenues towards education, healthcare, energy access, and infrastructural development in affected communities. 3, calls for the establishment of youth-focused apprenticeship and internship programs within the energy, mining, manufacturing, and technology sectors to address structural unemployment. 4, urges members of the states to promote decentralized energy systems through mini-grids, solar home systems, and community-based renewable energy projects in rural and underserved regions. 5, recommends the development of regional power pools and cross-border transmission networks to facilitate the export of surplus energy, generate national revenue, and improve energy security. 6, encourages technology transfer and capacity-building partnerships between developed and developing countries to enhance local expertise in renewable energy. 7, requests the World Bank, African Development Bank, and private sector partners to establish blended finance mechanisms for large-scale renewable energy. 8, encourages resource-rich developing countries to adopt transparent and independently audited revenue management systems to ensure accountability in collection, allocation, and expenditure in public funds. 9, encourages public-private partnerships to accelerate investment in renewable energy infrastructure, industrialization, and workforce development programs. 10, supports the expansion of local value addition and processing industries to reduce dependence on raw material exports and create higher skilled employment and opportunities. 11, requests the creation of an African Green Skills Initiative aimed at equipping young people with skills in solar technology, electrical training, battery storage systems, and sustainable industrial practices. This delegate now yields their time to the chair.
Thank you. The floor is now open for all points of information. Delegate of Libya, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The delegation of Libya would like to ask the committee, thanking the World Bank for supporting the projects like INGA 3 and solar grids, but we know that large infrastructures projects are often where corruption is most hidden. Will the funding provided be fully recorded in public beneficial ownership registries, and will contracts be awarded through open bidding so that no funds disappear or end up in private hands?
Delegate, you may respond.
Thank you, Delegate, for that question. It is addressed in our resolution. We have called for independently audited systems so that there is full transparency in terms of the funds allocated. Thank you.
Delegate, you may ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. The question I have for the delegation
Delegate,
is...
kindly refrain from using personal pronouns.
The question the Honorable has for the delegation is on what policies have they set out as a committee, rather, to make sure that they strengthen the education systems in developing nations, and also what digital tools have they set out to make sure that they improve both the healthcare and education delivery in the developing nations.
Delegate, you may respond.
Thank you. Clause 2 and 3 of our resolution, I will read them out loud again because they will answer your question. Clause number 2 says, it calls upon resource-rich states to allocate 15% of mining and natural resource revenues towards education, healthcare, energy access, and vocational training. Clause 3 of the resolution says, calls for the establishment of youth-focused apprenticeship and internship programs within the energy, mining, manufacturing, and technology sectors to address structural unemployment. Does that satisfy the inquiry?
Satisfied.
No further questions. We will now proceed to final voting.
Thank you, Secretary General. All those in favor of the draft resolution of ECOSOC, please raise your placards. Kindly keep your placards high. Apologies. Thank you very much, delegates. Placards down. All those against. Thank you very much, delegates. Placards done. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows: 164 votes in favor, 21 votes against. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the resolution of the Economic and Social Council. The chair now recognizes the Committee of UNCTAD. The Assembly will now invite the chair of Committee UNCTAD to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
All right, thank you very much, Secretary General, for recognition. My name is Victor Mulenga, and I'm standing as the chair of the United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD. The committee was assigned the thematic area of focus as a topic, which is resource-based economies and economic growth, critical minerals, global supply chains, and economies and economic development without domestic benefits. At this point, I'm going to invite the delegate of Burundi as our main submitter. Secretary General, the delegate
General
of
Assembly
Burundi.
now recognizes the delegate of Burundi as the main submitter of the resolution from the United Nations Trade and Development Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, fellow delegates. Good afternoon to everyone. The United Nations Committee on Trade and Development has resoluted on this. Our preambitory clauses state as follows. Number one, recognize the resource curse persists, recalling the previous single imbalance. Number three, the Dutch disease risks, and acknowledging the illicit financial flows, as well as the mineral processing gap and the technology gap. Setting into the operative clauses. Number one, calling upon member states to prioritize value addition by expanding domestic refinery, processing, manufacturing capacity, enabling resource-rich economies to participate fairly in the global trading system. Noting that China holds an average of 70% market share across 19 or 20 strategic related minerals at refinery stage, whereas DRC and many African countries only possess 14.5. Number two, we encourage the establishment and transparent management of sovereign wealth funds, the SWFs, through rigorous fiscal discipline in line with the IMF and World Bank. These are going to be done to stabilize government revenues and as well as reduce the effects of the Dutch disease. Number three, we urge the developed and developing nations, international financial institutions, and multinational corporations to support technology transfer initiatives through direct human resource. These include industrial training program, research and development partnership, knowledge sharing agreements that strengthen domestic industrial capabilities, highlighting that between 2010 and 2019, just 4 countries, US, Japan, Germany, and China, held 75% of global renewable energy patents, while Africa held less than 1%. Forging ahead. Number 4, we recommend that increased investment in human capital development, particularly through vocational and technical engineering education, aligned with national industrialization strategies. This notes that about 8% of African youth have completed technical or vocational training, and 1 in 4 of these Africans get employment.
The resolution has been wrongly structured, hence it doesn't qualify for voting.
The delegate will ask for some clarity.
Kindly start the resolution again.
Our preambitory clauses recognize the consisting resource curse.
The resolution is still wrongly structured, hence it does not qualify for voting.
The delegate asks for some clarity.
Delegate, you may take your seat. Since the resolution has been wrongly structured, it will not qualify for voting. We will now move on to the next committee. The chair now recognizes the Committee of the United Nations Environment Assembly. The chair will invite the chair of the United Nations Environment Assembly to approach the podium and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
distinguished delegates, good afternoon. Honorable President of the General Assembly, my name is Jonathan Manda, Chair of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Before I go further, I would like to thank the Secretary General of the General Assembly for allowing UNEA Committee to present its resolution. The Dais welcomes all delegations of the UNEA session of the General Assembly. The agenda under consideration is water insecurity and access inequality. The Chair now recognizes the delegation of Kenya as the main submitter of the UNEA draft resolution on water insecurity, inequality in access to clean water and sanitation as a development and governance crisis. Thank you.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate as the main submitter of the resolution from the United Nations Environment Assembly.
Secretary General, presiding officers, and honorable members, the delegation of Kenya rises today to present this resolution on behalf of the United Nations Environment Assembly. The General Assembly, observing the 354 million total people and 8% of the global rural population practicing open defecation. Recognizing that poor agriculture management accounts for the loss of a significant portion of the 70% of water allocated to farming globally. Aware of the 30% of treated water lost globally. Bearing in mind the Water Global Practice Fund, African Development Fund, Global Environmental Facility Trust Fund, Global Water Sanitation and Hygiene Thematic Fund, and the Global Water Fund by World Vision. Recognizing the ability of the private sector to improve operational efficiency, accelerate infrastructure delivery, and supplement public investments where financing gaps exist. Deeply concerned by the escalating impact of climate change on global freshwater ecosystems, which can cause severe seasonal droughts. Realizing the potential conflicts that can arise between countries sharing water resources. Recognizing the youth's unawareness of the issue of water insecurity and inequality. Noting that not all countries have the funds to implement certain water provision strategies. 1. Encourages open defecation-free programs for rural areas in exchange for being moved up a priority list for example, a new community borehole. 2. Recommends the use of soil bands in agriculture to retain water in the soil, reducing water usage in agriculture. 3. Reaffirms the use of renewable energy-powered desalination technologies, cellular smart meters, acoustic sensors, and the development of leak detection technologies. 4. Calls upon external and internal donors to fund the less fortunate countries by collectively creating a global water fund, which will be tracked through a publicly open ledger to minimize corruption, also re-emphasizing a result-based financing system. 5. Urges the proposed water fund to collaborate with regional development banks and governments to expand public infrastructure through the creation of public-private partnerships that will be regulated through independent regulatory of service delivery and performance standards through setting maximum price limits, legally binding service coverage targets, and transparency requirements. 6. Promotes the restoration of watersheds as natural ecological buffers against extreme droughts and floods. 7. Suggests that countries sharing river basins must co-sign data sharing agreements to collectively manage water allocation during regional climate droughts. 8. Recommends education and awareness campaigns on water conservation, sanitation, and environmental protection targeted towards the youth, women, children, and the elderly. 9. Demands aid provision for war and disaster-stricken countries and all underdeveloped countries in general from the UNICEF, World Bank, and countries willing to help. 10. Urges member states to charge lower prices for essential consumption and significantly higher prices for high-volume uses like swimming pools.
Delegates kindly refrain from being on the phone.
As a presenter of this resolution, we, the United Nations Environmental Assembly, submit.
The floor is now open to all points of information. Delegate of DR Congo, you have been recognized.
delegate in question the question is that how does this resolution plan on to maintain the transparency of the funds aided to it? Thank you.
Delegate, you may respond.
This resolution proposes publicly open ledgers and a result-based financing system to ensure the funds given to countries are actually being used for water provision strategies. Thank you.
Delegate of South Africa, you have been recognized.
The delegation of South Africa would like to know what you plan to do to ensure that industries abide to social corporate responsibility and ensure that waste is managed so that water is not polluted.
Thank you, Delegate. This resolution proposes open defecation-free programs for rural areas in exchange for being moved up a priority list for a new borehole, and this will ensure that the water that people are drinking in rural areas is actually going to be clean. Thank you.
No further POIs. We will now proceed to final voting.
Thank you, Secretary General. All those in favor of the draft resolution presented, please raise your placards. Delegates, let's raise our placards at once so that they can be counted without the issue of hesitations. Placards down, delegates. All those against. Thank you very much, Delegate Placastan. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows. 124 votes in favor, 73 against. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the United Nations Environment Assembly. The Chair now recognizes the Committee of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. the Chair will invite the Chair of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Honorable President of the General Assembly, distinguished delegates, my name is Konemi Pinifolo, and I had the pleasure of chairing the UNHCR in topic under consideration beyond protection, addressing the political, economic, and environmental root causes of forced displacement. In relation to the SDGs 10, reduced inequalities, and SDG 16, peace, justice, and strong institutions. The Chair now recognizes the main submitter of the UNHCR draft resolution on addressing the forced displacement through state sovereignty, economic self-resilience, and root causes accountability. I now have the honor to invite the delegates of the Russian Federation to present the resolution before the General Assembly.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate of Russia as the main submitter of the resolution from the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Committee.
Distinguished Secretary General, members of the auditorium, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Committee, topic addressing forced displacement through state sovereignty, economic self-reliance, and root cause accountability. Main submitter, the Russian Federation, co-sponsors Brazil, China, United Kingdom, and France. Signatories, the State of Palestine, the Democratic Republic of Congo, India, Kenya, Sudan, Senegal, Namibia, and Libya. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, recalling the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees, the 1967 Protocol relating to the status of refugees, the global impact on refugees, and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, particularly number 10, reduced inequality, and SDG number 16, peace, justice, and strong institution. Reaffirming the principles of sovereign equality, territorial integrity, and political dependence of all states, as well as the importance of international cooperation in accordance with the Charter of the United Nations. Deeply concerned by the continued rise in forced displacement globally, with over 117 people affected as of mid-2025, driven by armed conflict, political instability, economic inequality, institutional fragility, and other interconnected challenges. Recognizing that sustainable solutions to forced displacements require addressing its political, economic, and environmental root causes through peace building, economic development, institutional strengthening, and genuine international cooperation. Acknowledging the significant contributions and burdens undertaken by host countries and transit states in providing protection and assistance to displaced populations. Recognizing the need for balanced and evidence-based approaches to understanding the relationship between environmental challenges, economic conditions, conflict, and displacements. Emphasizing the importance of protecting the dignity, rights, and welfare of displaced persons while supporting long-term solutions that promote sustainability and resilience. Noting with appreciation the efforts of regional organizations and member states in managing displacements through context-specific approaches. Number one, the committee calls upon all member states to uphold the principles of state sovereignty, territorial integrity, and non-interference in the internal affairs of states while addressing the causes and consequences of forced displacements. Number two, encourages the international community to strengthen efforts aimed at preventing conflict, promoting peaceful dispute resolution, and supporting inclusive political dialogue in regions vulnerable to displacement. Number three, the committee urges member states, international financial institutions, and development partners to increase investment in sustainable economic development through countries of origin, through infrastructure development, job creation, technology transfer, equitable trade opportunities, and debt relief initiatives with appropriate measures in line with SDG number 10, reducing inequality, and peace building and strong institutions through SDG number 16. Number 4, the committee recommends the establishment of targeted economic resilience programs aimed at reducing poverty, unemployment, and inequality, particularly among youths and vulnerable communities most at risk of displacement. Number 5, encourages capacity building initiatives that strengthen domestic institutions through technical assistance, anti-corruption measures, the rule of law programs, and inclusive governance mechanisms consistent with SDG number 16, while fully respecting national ownership and priorities. Number 6, the committee calls for development and humanitarian assistance to be delivered in a manner that respects national ownership, local priorities, and the sovereign rights of states to manage their natural resources and strategic factors. Number 7, the committee supports voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable repatriation as preferred durable solution where conditions permit, accompanied by reconstruction assistance, reintegration support, and community reconciliation programs. Number 8, the committee requests the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, in collaboration with relevant United Nations agencies, to strengthen early warning systems for displacement risks through the integration of political, economic, social, and environmental incubators. Number 9, encourage expanded research, data collection, and information sharing regarding the integration between environmental changes, economic pressures, conflict, migration, in order to improve evidence-based policymaking. Number 10, the committee calls upon states and international actors involved in post-conflict environments to contribute meaningfully to reconstruction, recovery, and long-term development efforts aimed at preventing renewed displacement, with particular accountability placed on those whose actions contribute to instability. Number 11, the committee recommends the establishment of a joint development and oversight mechanism.
Is up.
Thank you.
The floor is now open to all points of information. Delegate of Angola, you have been recognized.
Madam Chairperson, the Republic of Angola suffered 27 years of war. During this time, a lot of their people migrated. Today, we suffer the same fate, as a lot of our people in Angola still migrate, but this time because their land is becoming a desert. The southern part of Angola, which is Kunene province, has now become a desert, and we risk more people still running away from their countries because they want greener pastures. What is this resolution's address to this? I thank you.
Delegate,
Madam
you may
Speaker,
respond.
through you, the delegation or the main submitter would love to respond to the question that has been raised by the delegation of Angola. In relation to resolution number 11, the committee recommends the establishment of a joint development and oversight mechanism in cooperation with relevant international financial institutions and UN agencies to promote transparent, accountable, and sustainable financing for displaced prevention initiatives. On top of that, the committee further calls for an action in terms of sustainable financing in ecological factors like droughts, floods, as well as many other ecological issues that are causing displacements across the globe. The international community cannot survive itself if the global north are the policymakers. But what we are calling as a committee is bringing together what we call the Come Together Overcome, which is going to be sponsored by the Brazil and the France delegation.
Delegate of Czech Republic.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Given the history of corruption in most developing countries, what measures is this resolution putting, practical measures, is this resolution putting in place to ensure that the funds that are being sponsored by the developing countries, by the developed countries to these developing countries are used for the intended purposes? What measures are they going to make sure that the funds that are being transferred for this intended purpose will be used for the rightful manners? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Through you, the chairperson, rather the Secretary General, in relation to Clause 5 of our resolution as a committee, we encourage capacity building initiatives that strengthen domestic institutions through technical assistance in anti-corruption measures, rule of law programs, and inclusive governance mechanisms consistent with SDG number 16, while fully respecting national ownership and priorities. As a committee, we've noted one of the major causes of conflict is tampering with state sovereignty and ownership of these nations. So what, as the committee is recommending, is to ensure that we build capacity in corruption fighting, strengthening the rule of law, and the justice systems of these countries. That is why all the United Nations agencies have to come together with a joint development agency that will alleviate all these problems that the developing countries are facing. With that regard, we have the signatories, about 5 countries from Africa: Senegal, Libya, Sudan, Namibia, and Angola. Together, we are working in forming a joint venture through their regional bodies, SADC, COMESA, and the African Union. I submit, Madam Speaker.
No further questions. We will now proceed to final voting. I will now hand over to the President of the General Assembly to conduct the final voting.
Thank you very much, Secretary General. All those in favor of the draft resolution presented, raise your placards. Thank you very much, delegates. Placards down. All those against.
I'm opposed.
The results are as follows: 174 votes in favor, 7 against. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the resolution of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and thank you to the Honorable House. I submit.
The Chair now recognizes the Committee of the African Union. I invite the Chair of the African Union to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members of the House. My name is Jonathan Mape, a co-chair for Africa Union. And our topic for our committee as Africa Union, we were looking at migration versus sovereignty, balancing free movement and national control in Africa. As a co-chair, it is my honor and privilege to call upon our delegate to come and present on this resolution, who is no other than the delegate of South Africa. Thank you.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate of South Africa as the main submitter for the resolution from African Union.
Honorable Speaker, thank you for this opportunity to present the resolution of the African Union before this distinguished court. The African Union was tasked with the topic of migration versus sovereignty, Pan-Africanism, visa restrictions, and the unfinished project of African integration, SDG 8, 10, and 16. The sponsors of this resolution are the South Africa, Zambia, Ghana, Gambia, Tanzania, the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Kenya, Botswana, Burundi, Mozambique, and Sudan. The signatories of this resolution are Libya, Zimbabwe, Democratic Republic of Congo, as well as Namibia. The African Union, recalling the AU Protocol on Free Movement of Persons, Rights of Residents, and the Rights of Establishment 2018, and the Collective Committee of Member States to the free movement of persons across the continent. Recognizing that the African continent free trade era of 2019 cannot achieve its full economic potential without complementary movement of people, particularly the skilled and entrepreneurs. Recalling that the SADC Protocol on the Facilitation of Movement of Persons 2005 and the ECOWAS Free Movement Protocol as regional presenters, demonstrating the feasibility of managed free movement within the African sub-regions. Affirming that the right of migrants safely and sovereignty right of member states to manage their borders can also be respected, and that the strong institutes can help achieve this balance. Also aware that the irregular and unsafe migration routes often appear where there are no legal, safe, and orderly ways for people to move, which puts the security and the integrity of African citizens at risk. Noting with concern that the restriction visa regimes disproportionately harm landlocked member states such as Zambia and other landlocked countries which depend on regional connectivity for trade, investment, and economic diversity. The African Union expresses appreciation for the work of the AU Commission, regional economic committees, and the civic society organizations in advancing the discourse on free movement and Pan-Africanism. We are also aware that moving too quickly to fully continental free movement that could overwhelm the institution and infrastructure of host states. It is with these reasons that the African Union first suggests Number one, calls upon all AU member states that have not yet signed, ratified, or domesticated the AU Protocol on Free Movement of Persons to do so in a period of 4 years with the help of the African Commission. We also recommend that the regional economic communities, including SADC, ECOWAS, ESC, ECCA, and AMU harmonize their respective visa border management regimes using the ECOWAS Free Movement Zone as a model, and report progress to the AU Assembly at each ordinary session. We also employ this court that it established an AU Border Security and Mobility Fund in order to be administered by the AU Commission. We request that this House commissions to create a dedicated migration and development facility for landlocked member states, recognizing the suppressional vulnerability to restricted border policies. We also call upon this House that AU member states migration and border policies to be reviewed for alignment with SDG 8, 10, and 16, with member states submitting voluntary national reviews to the AU Commission detailing how their migration governance frameworks will contribute to the hidden goals of this agenda. We also call upon this honorable court.
Delegate, your time has elapsed.
Thank you very much, Chair.
The floor is now open for point of information. Delegate of Spain, you have been recognized.
do we have any timelines for these resolutions to be achieved? Or is the General Assembly just supposed to indefinitely wait and perhaps waste our votes on on a resolution that we don't know when we should expect results? Thank you.
Delegate, you may respond.
Thank you, Chair. In response to the delegate's question, I will refer you to clause 1. We call upon this honorable court to ensure that member states sign, ratify, and domesticate the AU protocol for free movement with persons within a period of 4 years through the help of the AU Commission.
Delegate of Senegal, you have been recognized.
Thank you so much, Chair. What mechanisms exist to prevent the abuse of free movement policies by traffickers, smugglers, or extremist groups? Thank you so much.
Delegate, you may respond.
Thank you, Chair. I would ask the delegate to repeat their question.
Delegate of Senegal, kindly articulate your question properly.
What mechanisms exist to prevent the abuse of free movement policies by traffickers, smugglers, and extremist groups?
Delegate, you may respond.
I believe, if I heard the question correctly, is will the free movement policy affect or enable the evils of the world, such as human trafficking, crime, and terrorism? Am I correct?
Delegate, kindly refrain from using personal pronouns.
Withdrawn, Chair. Thank you. The African Union have made sure, if you highly highlighted the topic under discussion, it is migration versus sovereignty. As the African Union Committee, affiliates of this distinguished court, we simply did not choose migration over sovereignty, but according to our clause, numbered sorry. Okay. If you carefully heard me, according to our resolutions, we emphasize that these member states ensure that as we are emphasizing for a free protocol of movement, we are also ensuring that our states are being protected, our borders are being protected through what we are going to call as the AU Border Fund. This fund is going to ensure that developing countries get the necessary funding for them to establish strong border points so that we could fight these evils of the world, such as human trafficking, terrorism, as well as crimes, from entering their borders, while ensuring that free trade and movement does happen.
No further questions. We will now proceed to final voting. For final voting, I will hand over to the President of the General Assembly to conduct the final voting.
Thank you, Madam Secretary General. All those in favor of the drafted resolution, please raise your placards. Thank you, delegates. Those are against? Thank you, Chair. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows: 93 votes in favor, 46 against. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the resolution from the African Union. Before we move forward, I will now call upon to our director, Mr. Bernard, to explain and state his grounds on why the previous resolution of the United Nations Trade and Development Committee did not qualify.
Thank you, SG, and thank you, the presiding officers. Good afternoon, delegates. Yeah, I saw when I just tried to step out, I was followed, almost beaten. Oh, I'm joking. It is right that we just clarify why that resolution was dismissed. It's on 6 to 7 grounds. The first one being the resolution lacked operative clauses, and you cannot call a resolution. A paper can't qualify to be a resolution without operative clauses. That's number one. Two, to me, it's read more like a research paper, you know, more than a resolution. It was overwhelmed with so many statistics. You people were trained on how to come up with a resolution. And that one definitely was not a resolution. Three, it had a number of incomplete sentences. Others were even vague. We cannot admit such a resolution here, sadly. Four, it wasn't inclusive. It's just focused on a few countries that I can mention. Then five, several questionable statistics. Some of them you could literally see that these are not true statistics. So we are here, this is more than a simulation. Remember, we told you want things that are factual. Some of you, I've seen 2 resolutions that have made it from this General Assembly. Still there are the number of loopholes. So I think as we are given the chance to work on our resolutions, let us ensure that we give things that have quality. Thank you.
We will now continue. The chair now recognizes the Committee of the United Nations Children's Fund. I now invite the chair of the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Honorable members of the House, my name is Yande Kangwa Nsofwa, and I want to thank the Secretary General for according me this opportunity. I'm serving as the chair for the United Nations Children Fund. Our committee had a topic which is invisible prisons, refugee children, child soldiers, loss of identity, livelihood, and access to education in prolonged displacement. Without further ado, allow me to allow the main submitter, the delegate of Angola, to please rise and approach the podium.
Delegate, you may begin.
Secretary General, Honorable Chair, Presiding Officers, and Honorable Members, the delegation of Angola stands before you today to present this resolution on behalf of the United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF. The Angolan delegation greets you all as we introduce the following resolution paper. To the General Assembly, Committee, United Nations Children Fund, UNICEF. Topic, Invisible Prisons, Refugee Children, Child Soldiers, Loss of Identity and Livelihood, and Access to Education in Prolonged Displacement. Sponsors, Saudi Arabia, China, Turkey, Angola. Signatories, Democratic Republic of Congo, Botswana, Brazil, Rwanda, Palestine, Italy, France, and United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and Somalia. The United Nations Children Fund. Recalling the Convention on the Rights of a Child, 1989, particularly Articles 22, 28, and 38, which emphasize the protection of refugee and asylum-seeking children, their rights to education, and the prohibition of their recruitment into armed groups. Reaffirming the guiding principles on internal displacement, especially Principle 17.3 on the family reunification. Acknowledging United Nations Secretary Resolution Council 1261, 199, condemning the recruitment and targeting of children into armed groups. Deeply concerned by the prolonged displacement crisis that traps refugee children and asylum-seeking children in invisible prisons, characterized by trauma, loss of identity, psychological diseases, distress, as well as barriers to education and livelihood. Recognizing the disproportionate impact on children fleeing from conflict zones and other targeted regions. With Brazil having recognized over 144,000 refugees as of July 2024. Noting with appreciation the efforts of host countries in providing alternative protection, routes, and integration programs, with acknowledging the strain on national systems. Emphasizing the importance of rights-based, humanitarian, non-discriminatory, and inclusive approach that prioritizes the best interests of the child. Aware that the quality education, SDG 4, and reduced inequalities, SDG 10, are essential for breaking cycles of displacement and enabling long-term integration. Recognizing further the need for open access to border monitoring platforms across member states due to inability to determine where non-state armed groups targeting children are located. Operative clauses. Calls upon all member states to fully implement in the Convention on the Child's Rights, particularly ensuring refugee and asylum-seeking children have access to education regardless of legal status, including through simplified documentation processes and non-formal education programs, with a decrease of at least 7% of refugees globally within 24 months of the adoption of the resolution. Urges member states to establish and expand temporary learning spaces and multilingual education initiatives in prolonged displacement settings with adequate teaching, training, and resources, housing at least 500 children with at least one trauma counselor per 50 children, with an increase of at least 5% of refugee children able to access secondary education and 10% of refugee children able to access primary education within 18 months of the adoption of the resolution. Encourages the integration of refugee children into national education systems while preserving their cultural identity and providing psychological support to their addressed trauma and invisible prisons, with at least 40% of refugees being legally and socially integrated within 36 months of the adoption of the resolution. Requests UNICEF, UNICHER, and relevant parties, private sector, and national governments to strengthen vocational training and appreciation programs linked to education for adolescents and youth, aiming to prevent the loss of livelihood and reduce vulnerability to recruitment as armed soldiers, with the first vote taking place within 24 months.
Your time has elapsed. The floor will now open for point of information. Delegate, you may ask your question. Delegate, it's the one behind.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. The delegate would like to ask on the issue of invisible children. The resolution addresses invisible children. How does this resolution define this term?
Delegate, you may respond.
May the delegate please repeat that question?
Delegate, kindly articulate your question properly.
Okay, the resolution, it addresses invisible children. How does it define this term?
I would like to pass the floor to the delegate of the United Kingdom.
Delegate, kindly refrain from using personal pronouns.
My apologies.
Delegate, kindly refrain from using personal pronouns.
We apologize.
The term invisible prisons is defined, invisible refugees is defined as refugees that are legally invisible, as they do not have birth registration or any form of registration in the country they are residing in. Thank you.
Did you know that? Delegate of Mali, you have been recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What funding mechanisms will guarantee sustained support when displacement lasts for many years? Thank you.
The delegate can respond.
The resolution calls for burden sharing between international donors, host countries, and the private sector. The CDF clause ensures contributions are tailored to each country's capacity. No one-size-fits-all financial obligation.
The delegate of Botswana, you have been recognized.
On the issue of finances, is Turkey willing to contribute money when Turkey itself is a middle earning country? How is it going to resolute and keep on funding this?
The delegate may respond.
We would like to yield the floor to the delegation of Turkey.
The delegation of Turkey acknowledges that constant funding will be needed for this resolution and for the protection and sustainability of these refugees. Now, Turkey, being a country with the highest number of refugees hosted in its country, knows the burden of containing refugees. Hence, Turkey is willing to fund developing countries to host their refugees in partnership with the UNICEF, UNHCR, private sectors, and host governments.
No further questions. We will now proceed to final voting. I will now hand over to the President of the General Assembly to conduct the final voting.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary General. All those in favor of the drafted resolution, raise your placards. Thank you, delegates. All those against? Thank you very much, delegates. Over to you, Secretary General.
The results are as follows: 116 votes in favor, 38 against. Having obtained the required majority, the resolution is hereby adopted by the General Assembly. Congratulations to the sponsors and submitters of the resolution of the United Nations Children's Fund. The Chair now recognizes the Committee of Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA. I invite the Chair of COMESA to come forward and introduce the main submitter of the committee's resolution.
Good afternoon, honorable members. I would like to inform the House that I am standing in for the chair of COMESA as he is unavailable. Before we proceed, I would like to thank the Secretary General for giving us this time to speak. The topic at hand today is free trade versus protectionism in relation to SDG 8. May the delegates of Rwanda please rise and approach the podium.
The General Assembly now recognizes the delegate of Rwanda as the main submitter of the resolution from the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa.
Honorable Chair, distinguished delegates, the General Assembly, the Common Markets for Eastern and Southern Africa, COMESA, the controversy at hand, free trade versus protectionism. The sponsors of this resolution are the Democratic Republic of Congo, the Republic of Senegal, the Union of Comoros, the Republic of Madagascar, the Republic of Rwanda, the Republic of Malawi, the Federal Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, the Republic of Uganda, the Republic of Sudan, the Democratic Republic of Zimbabwe. The signatories is the Republic of Zambia. COMESA, appreciating the central role of SMEs, women, and youth in COMESA member state economies, which can ultimately make up over 60% of the workforce in many member countries. Recalling the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the African Continental Agenda 2063 in promoting intra-African trade and industrialization. Reaffirming its commitment to UN Sustainable Development Goal number 8, which is decent work and economic growth, and SDG number 17, which is participation for the goals. Acknowledging the importance of industrial development, job creation, infrastructure investment, and regional value addition in achieving sustainable economic growth. Emphasizing that regional integration must be inclusive, equitable, sustainable, and responsive to the developmental realities of both developed and less developed member states. Number one, the establishment of a pilot COMESA SME resilience and competitiveness fund to support small and medium enterprises through financing, skills development, digitalization, and market across opportunities. Number two, the promotion of strong intra-African trade and regional value chains through coordinated industrial policies and increased investment in manufacturing and value-added production. Number three, the adoption of a differentiated trade liberalized framework that allows less developed and structurally vulnerable economies longer transition periods to adjust to tariff reductions and increased competition. Number 4, enhanced cooperation among member states in infrastructure development.
Delegate, the resolution has been wrongly structured, hence it doesn't qualify for voting. The delegate can take his seat. Moving forward, the chair now recognizes the Committee of the International Court of Justice 1. I will now invite the President to come forward and introduce the verdict of International Court of Justice 1.
I'd like to thank the Secretary General for giving me this opportunity. My name is Zoe Lisulo. I'm the President of the ICJ1. A verdict delivered by Judges Mervis Kalua, Lillian Mwansa, Nicola Marufu, and Tehila Piri regarding the matter of India versus Pakistan, the case of Jamal versus Kashmir. The facts of the case are, and as I quote, the state of India was divided into 2 states, mainly India and Pakistan. With these 2 states, there was a plebiscite state by the name of Jamal versus Kashmir, which was ruled by Maharaja. In 1947, Maharaja signed an accession to legally transfer Jammu and Kashmir to India territory. India claimed that they legally transferred all of the sovereignty of Jammu and Kashmir, while Maharaja stated that he only signed the instrument of accession agreeing to join India. The conflict began due to this dispute of legitimacy of accession between the 2 states. Due to this, an armed conflict broke out, and the issues that were brought before the United Nations led to them calling for a ceasefire. The International Court of Justice is established as the principal judicial organ of the United Nations, and it hereby delivers its judgment on the disputes between the applicant and the respondent states, as presented in the current proceedings of the remade Zambia Model United Nations ICJ simulation. The court has considered all written submissions, oral pleadings, witness testimonies, evidence presented, and applicable international law. The court has jurisdiction brought before it by its signatories based off the UN Charter in accordance with the statute of the International Court of Justice. The court finds that it has jurisdiction under Article 36 of the International Court of Justice. This jurisdiction is established through mutual consent of both parties. Jurisdiction is partially limited to specific claims and is established over certain claims. The court accepts the following stipulated facts agreed upon by both parties: that India's Independence Act of 1947 was passed by the British Parliament. That stipulations 2 of the stipulations submitted by both parties, stipulation 3 of the stipulations submitted by both parties. The court identifies the following legal issues for determination: whether the assertion of the instrument was valid,
whether or not Resolution 47 is binding on both parties, whether or not the issue of self-determination has merit. The court has relied upon Article 38 of the International Court of Justice, which dictates what exactly the sources of law to rely on are. The court has relied upon the following legal sources: the United Nations Charter, the International Court of Justice Statute, customary international law, relevant international treaties and conventions, prior ICJ jurisprudence, and other applicable legal principles. The findings and facts of law. Claim 1, the state of Pakistan did not fulfill their part in withdrawing their troops. Their claim is true that the troops are still occupying Jammu and Kashmir. The court analyzes as per the witness testimonies and the acceptance of the claim by the respondents. Claim 2, the state of Pakistan's claim in the signing of the agreement did not prove that the said claims disapprove the evidence that was produced, showing that the agreement between India and Pakistan, as per the agreement submitted by evidence of the letters given to us by the leaders. The applicants proved their case beyond reasonable doubt.
President, kindly just announce the winning case.
All right. The court hereby rules as follows: that the state of Jammu and Kashmir retrieved their troops, that both parties are bound by the state agreement, and that the resolution 47 is upheld. The court concludes that the applicant's claims are upheld in full, and that the respondent is found in violation of international law. Thus is the court's final judgment.
The International Court of Justice has reached its decision. The court finds in favor India. Congratulations to the winning party, and thank you to both sides for their outstanding advocacy and participation. The chair now recognizes the Committee of International Court of Justice 2. I will now invite the Vice President to come forward and introduce the verdict of the committee.
Thank you, Secretary General, for this rare opportunity to present the verdict on behalf of ICJ2. Good afternoon, honorable members of this House. My name is Patricia Ngandu. I'm here before you as the Vice President of the International Court of Justice 2. The verdict that I'm about to present was decided by judges Elliot Chingumbu, Samuel Yumba, Kasonde Kangwa, and Patrick Silavwe. The International Court of Justice 2 successfully concluded its deliberations on the matter concerning Israel USA versus Islamic Republic of Iran. This dispute arises from the alleged unlawful use of force by the respondents against the Islamic Republic of Iran under the justification of anticipatory self-defense. The applicant argued that no armed attack had occurred against the respondents and that the military actions undertaken constitute unlawful preventive war in violation of Article 2, Sub-Article 4 of the United Nations Charter. The respondents maintained that intelligence assessments and evolving security threats established an imminent danger sufficient to justify defensive action under Article 51 of the UN Charter and customary international law. The dispute therefore centered on whether international law permits states to use force before an actual armed attack occurs. The core legal question that was being heard by the court was whether or not Article 51 of the UN Charter permits anticipatory or preventive self-defense, or is the use of force lawful only after an armed attack has
Vice President,
occurred?
kindly announce the winning case.
After careful consideration of the evidence presented, witness testimonies, legal arguments, and applicable principles of international law, and by majority decision, the court hereby rules in favor of the applicants who were representing the Islamic Republic of Iran. The court finds that the respondent state violated international law through the unlawful use of force. Thank you.
The International Court of Justice has reached its decision. The court finds in favor Islamic Republic of Iran. Congratulations to the winning party, and thank you to both sides for their outstanding advocacy and participation. The chair now recognizes the Committee of International Court of Justice 3. I will now invite the president of ICJ 3 to come forward and give the verdict. Before we begin, the resolution for the Committee Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa that didn't qualify was further inspected to be seen that the main submitter was not reading it correctly. The resolution was correct, but the main submitter was not reading it correctly. We'll now vote now for the resolution for COMESA. All delegates in favor for the resolution of COMESA may raise their placard. Delegates, kindly maintain decorum. All in favor for the resolution of COMESA. All against? With majority voting in favor, the resolution of COMESA passes. President, you may now give the verdict.
Honorable members of the House, Secretariat General, my name is Tinashe Belem, acting as the Presidency of the International Court of Justice 3. I stand before you to present the final verdict of the court. Due to restraints of time, we'll rule the final verdicts after the readings of the title case. South Africa versus the Republic of Israel in the application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide. This ruling was done on the 4th of June 2026. The presiding judge, Tinashe Belem, and the other judges are as follows: Susiso, Lauren, Takatende, and Abaweni. The applicant state of the Republic of South Africa versus the respondent state of the State of Israel. We rule in favor of South Africa due to the following reasoning. The reparations that were done on the diplomatic and institutional remedies are required. The court orders the following details. Due to that will be finalized in the other ruling. The final judgment is as follows. The applicants, which are the State of South Africa, claims are upheld fully in the Court of Justice, and the respondents were found in the violation of the International Court of Law.
The International Court of Justice has reached its decision. The court finds in favor of South Africa. Congratulations to the winning party, and thank you to both sides for their outstanding advocacy and participation. We will now hand over the floor to Mr. Bernard for closing remarks.
Thank you. Yeah, we have reached the end of our session. I just hope it's been a fruitful one. A lot of learning has taken place. Just few announcements on the way forward. I understand not everyone plans on attending tonight's gala. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Tomorrow we all meet at 10 hours for further announcements. We shall post outside or on the WhatsApp since we are live on TV. But thank you.
As we conclude this General Assembly, I extend my sincere gratitude to all delegates, chairs for your hard work, dedication, and commitment to constructive debate. Today, we have demonstrated the power of diplomacy, cooperation, and dialogue in addressing global challenges. The resolutions adopted reflect the collective efforts and ideas of this Assembly. Thank you for making this session a success. I wish you all the very best in your future endeavors. With that, I hereby declare this session of the General Assembly adjourned. Can all delegates remain upstanding? Delegates, kindly maintain the quorum.
Well, thank you so much for having joined us during the live broadcast of the General Assembly. That's the Image Aiden Model United Nations that we've been broadcasting live to you here on Parliament TV since morning. And so to you, our viewers, would like to say thank you very much for having followed this session. It's bye for now. Continue watching Parliament Television.
The world is shifting. Alliances globally are fragile. Public confidence in global and national institutions is declining. The clock to 2030 is ticking. With only 4 years left to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals, we must ask the important questions. Can global cooperation survive polarization? Can institutions still deliver justice? Can youth lead where systems have stalled?
From the 2nd to 5th June 2026, Lusaka becomes the meeting point of 500 young leaders, thinkers, change makers, diplomats, not watching history, making.
Emerge Zambia, in partnership with Eden University, presents Emerge Eden International Model United Nations 2026. Our theme, Beyond 2030, Rethinking Global Cooperation, Accountability, and Youth Action in a Polarized World. General Assembly debates, embassy briefings, policy under pressure, real negotiations.
This is not a passive call. This is diplomacy at the edge of global tension.
From the National Assembly of Zambia to Eden University. Are you 14 to 26 years old? Well, this is your chance to step into something big, exciting,